welcome to the deep dive. Today we're really zoning in on a specific, quite detailed section of the Old Testament. We're looking at Numbers chapter 29, verses 12 through 40.
That's right. And our main source material here is, well, the scripture itself, obviously, but also some notes from a guide called Feasts, Offerings, and Giving's Joy, which uses something like a 7-step QT approach.
Okay, so the plan for this deep dive is to really get to grips with these offerings, what exactly was commanded, but also kind of explore what might be going on underneath, ideas about giving, trust, gratitude, even joy, which is mentioned in those notes.
Exactly.
So for you listening, hopefully this gives you a good, solid understanding, maybe sparks a few of those aha moments along the way.
Yeah.
So where should we start with all this detail?
Well, I think the first thing is just setting the scene, the timing. The passage points straight to the 15th day of the 7th month. That's when this Holy Convocation begins.
A holy convocation, that sounds pretty important.
Yeah.
More than just a regular meeting, I guess.
Oh, definitely. It means a sacred gathering, a time set apart specifically for, well, religious observance. And this wasn't just a quick thing. It went on for 7 days.
7 days.
Yeah, and during that whole time, ordinary work was basically forbidden.
Okay, so no day jobs for a week.
Yeah.
That really highlights how central this was.
Absolutely. It signals a period of intense spiritual focus.
Right. So let's dig into the offerings themselves. It sounds like there was a very precise list.
Very precise. For those first 7 days, the core was the burnt offering. And interestingly, the number of bulls actually decreased each day.
Oh, really? How did that work?
So day 1, they were instructed to offer 13 young bulls, plus 2 rams and 14 male lambs. These lambs had to be a year old, and without any defects, without blemish.
13 bulls to start with. That's a lot. That's a massive commitment right off the bat.
It really is. And it wasn't just day 1. This pattern continued, but with 1 less bull each day.
Ah.
So day 2 had 12 bulls, day 3 had 11, and so on, right down to 7 bulls on the 7th day.
Down to 7. But the other animals?
They stayed the same. Always 2 rams, always 14 lambs, with those same requirements, year-old, no blemishes, every day for 7 days.
Okay, so a clear downward progression for the bulls, but consistency with the rams and lambs. That's quite a specific instruction. What else was part of the daily ritual?
Well, alongside the burnt offerings, there was a grain offering each day. This was fine flour mixed with oil.
Okay.
And the amounts were specified, too, based on the animal. 3/10 of an ephah of flour for each bull, 2/10 for each ram, and 1/10 for each lamb.
An ephah. Remind me, how much is that roughly?
It's a dry measure. Maybe think like 20 liters or so. Maybe a bit more. So yeah, significant amounts of flour and oil each day.
Definitely.
And then there were drink offerings, too. The text mentions they accompanied the burnt and grain offerings in the prescribed quantities, but it doesn't actually list those quantities for us right here.
Right, so a full package deal. Burnt offering, grain offering, drink offering. Was that everything?
Almost. There was one more crucial element each day for those first 7 days.
Okay.
A male goat, offered specifically as a sin offering.
Ah, a sin offering.
Yeah, and this was in addition to the regular burnt offering, grain offering, and drink offering for that day. It wasn't it was alongside.
So even during this big feast, this holy time, there's still this daily acknowledgement of, well, sin and the need for atonement.
Exactly. It seems embedded in the whole process. Sin offerings were pretty standard in their worship, a way to seek reconciliation.
Okay, that covers the first 7 days. But the passage mentions an 8th day, too, doesn't it? What happened then?
It does. The 8th day is called a solemn assembly. And like the other days, no ordinary work.
Right.
But the offerings changed quite dramatically. For the burnt offering on this final day, it was just 1 bull, 1 ram, and 7 male lambs. Still year-old, still without blemish.
Wow, okay. 1 bull compared to 13 on the first day. That's a really noticeable drop.
A huge difference, yeah. It definitely feels like a shift.
And it did still have the other offerings?
Yes, the text says that these were accompanied by the grain and drink offerings in their prescribed amounts, just like the days before. And importantly, there was still a male goat for a sin offering on the 8th day, too.
So the sin offering continues right to the end, even with the reduced burnt offering. It makes you wonder then, what was the overall point? Why all this incredible detail? Verse 39 seems relevant here.
It really does. Verse 39 says, these specific offerings are to be presented at your appointed feasts.
Yeah.
And it clarifies they are in addition to any personal vow offerings or free will offerings people might bring.
Okay.
And it lists them again. for your burnt offerings and for your grain offerings and for your drink offerings and for your peace offerings. So these weren't optional extras for the feast. They were the required core of observing it properly.
Got it. These are the fixed requirements for this specific holy time. Now, those 7-step QT notes you mentioned offer an interesting perspective on the why behind it all, don't they?
Yeah, they suggest something quite profound, I think. The note says, roughly, that God doesn't just ask for giving for its own sake. He invites people to give as a way to grow.
Grow in what way?
In trust, in gratitude, and in love. And the note finishes by saying that when you understand that, giving stops being just a duty and actually becomes a joy.
That really reframes it, doesn't it? From obligation to, well, opportunity. An opportunity for spiritual growth.
Exactly. It suggests the very act of participating in these offerings wasn't just about checking boxes for God, but about cultivating something within the worshiper's heart, a different posture towards God and towards giving itself.
That makes a lot of sense. And then verse 40 just wraps it up by saying, Moses told the Israelites everything exactly as the Lord commanded.
Right. It emphasizes the divine origin and the importance of following these instructions precisely.
So, thinking about this for you, our listener, what can we take away from all this detail? Why the specific numbers, the gradual decrease in bulls, the different animals?
Well, the sheer amount of detail has to tell us something, right? It suggests these actions were incredibly significant, central to what this feast was all about. The repetition over 7 days, that pattern, it could symbolize a kind of completeness, a total dedication during this sacred week. And that decreasing number of bulls, maybe, as you said, starting with a huge grand gesture, and then maybe moving towards something more focused, perhaps more internal as the week went on. It's one way to read it.
That's a really interesting thought, like a journey mapped out in the offerings.
Yeah.
And the sin offering being there every single day.
Yeah, that's a constant thread, a reminder, even in celebration, of the need for atonement, for acknowledging human imperfection before God.
Definitely. And what about that sharp contrast between the first 7 days and the 8th day's offering, that big reduction?
It's striking, isn't it? Maybe the initial abundance, the 13 bulls on day 1, represents this massive outpouring of gratitude, maybe commitment, right at the start of this major festival.
Right.
Then the 8th day, after the full week is done, perhaps it signifies, or maybe a sense of completion, or a transition, moving from the main intense part of the feast to a sort of concluding, focused act of worship.
Almost like the 7 days are the main event, the big communal effort, and the 8th day is a kind of solemn concluding punctuation mark.
That's a good way to put it. And linking back to that 7-step QT idea, you have to wonder if the very process of doing this, day after day, preparing the animals, the grain, bringing them forward, was designed to cultivate that trust and gratitude.
Yeah, it wasn't easy. It required resources, time, effort, intentional participation.
Exactly. So engaging in something that demanding, that specific, over a whole week, it could really embed those values. Maybe that's how giving shifts from just being a duty to becoming a source of joy through the lived experience of doing it consistently and seeing its connection to something bigger.
So pulling it all together, we've looked closely at Numbers 29, seen the incredibly specific instructions for this feast. The scale of the offerings, the daily sin offering, that interesting decrease in bulls, and the shift on the 8th day. And we've touched on this powerful idea that it wasn't just about the outward action, but maybe about an inner transformation, fostering trust, gratitude, and joy through the act of giving.
Precisely. These ancient, detailed instructions likely carry deep meaning, connecting the community profoundly to their faith, their God, and maybe even to each other through this shared act.
Okay, so here's something to perhaps mull over as you finish listening or go about your day. If these ancient practices involve such specific, tangible acts of giving, designed perhaps to foster certain inner qualities, what could be a modern-day equivalent for us?
That's a great question.
You know, obviously not literal animal sacrifices, but what kinds of consistent, intentional actions could we engage in today? Actions that might similarly help us cultivate a deeper sense of trust, real gratitude, and maybe even that joyful engagement in the things that matter most to us, something to think about.